Hi, let's look at factoring. Now, I'm going to start out with a simple example with regular numbers and work that into factoring polynomials. So let's take the case of 10 and 40. I want to find the greatest common factor of 10 and 40. The largest number that will go evenly into both 10 and 40. So let's look at their primes. In this case, it's 2 and 5. 2 cubed is 8, times 5 is 40, 2 times 5 is 10. Now, what's the smallest factors that they have in common? In this case, it's 2 and 5. And you multiply those together and you get 10. That's the greatest common factor. Now let's look at a polynomial. Let's look at the primes of 5 and 15 first off. And we see that we get 5, and then we have 3 times 5. The smallest prime that they have in common is a 5. And in the case of x squared x, we take the smallest exponent, so that's x. So we can factor out a 5x from that. In the next case, let's look at the primes of 4, 8, and 2. The smallest prime, the smallest number will be 2. And then we can take out a y, because y is the smallest exponent. And that will leave us with 2y times the quantity 2y cubed minus 4y minus 1. Okay, in our next case here, let's group all the terms that have a 3 as a coefficient together, and all the ones that have a as a coefficient. And then let's, in the case of the first parentheses, let's factor out a 3. And then in the second parentheses, let's factor out an a. And then you can see that we can factor out an x plus y. And so we should be left with the quantity x plus y times the quantity 3 plus a. Now, here we have Newton, and he's taken his son to the playground. Now, the playground is a square playground. And let's express that as a polynomial. So a equals x squared minus 6x plus 9, let's say. Now, if we would factor that, we would get the dimensions of the playground, the length and the width. Now, this polynomial fits a special situation here of a form x squared plus bx plus c. Now, what we want to do is find the factors of 9 such that when you multiply them together, you get plus 9, and when you add them together, you get a negative 6. So we put x's out in the parentheses, first in the parentheses, and then put the factors that fit that situation. And we find that negative 3 and negative 3 fit that situation. So x minus 3 times the quantity x minus 3 times the quantity x minus 3. Now, let's try another one here. We need to think of some factors of 12 and look for the ones that were, when you multiply them together, you get 12, and when you add them together, you get negative 7. So, we put our x's out front in the parentheses there, and we look through some factors, and we find that negative 3 and negative 4 fit that situation. So we put those within the parentheses, and we'll get x minus, the quantity x minus 3 times the quantity x minus 4. In another situation here, we think of the factors of 50, and we look for the factors such that when you multiply them together, you get 50. When you add them together, you get 15, that middle term there. So we put the x's out front in the parentheses, and then we look through our list of factors here, and we find that 5 and 10 best fit that situation. So we put 5 and 10 in the parentheses, and we get the quantity x plus 5 times the quantity x plus 10. Now, our next situation here, this fits this somewhat, except that we have a y squared at the end. So let's put our parentheses down there, but let's put an x at the beginning and a y at the end, and then just think of negative 33 here, and try to find some of the factors such that when you multiply them together, you get a negative 33. When you add them together, you get a plus 8. And so if we look through some of the factors, we find that negative 3 and 11 fit the bill. So the quantity x minus 3y times the quantity x plus 11y is our answer. Now, this final case here is a little bit tricky. It's a situation where we have a coefficient out in front of the x squared. In this case, it's going to be 6. Now, what you do is you multiply the a times the c. In this case, the 6 times the 6, we get 36. Now, we think of the factors of 36 such that when you add them together, you'll get 5. So, look through some of the factors, and we have a negative 4 and a 9 that will fit that situation. Now, put a y with that negative 4 and 9, and we'll get a situation that looks like this here. 6y squared minus 4y plus 9y minus 6. The negative 4y and the plus 9y will give us that 5y. Now let's group them up, the first two terms and the last two terms, and factor them. So we can factor out a 2y in the first parentheses and a 3 in the second parentheses there. And then we can factor out a 3y minus 2. So in the end we get the quantity 3y minus 2 times the quantity of 2y plus 3. Thank you.